Hello, welcome to Comix Rant, episode something. I can't actually remember how far of these episodes I have, but welcome to another episode, and let me get these things off. You guys look so real. So today, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite artists that I grew up with, John Byrne, and I don't actually know what's going on with his persona nowadays, but it seems like people don't like him as much, or he's very divisive within the fans. But I grew up with his stuff and I loved it. So that's what I'm going to talk about now. What's funny is, as I was preparing for this episode, I wanted to talk about him in the first half, and as one of my influences and one of the things that gets me into comics. The strange part is I don't actually have a lot of his stuff physically anymore. I moved to the States when I went to college here, and most of my John Byrne comics are in the Philippines. And the stuff that I got into was his Superman run, because I'm a Superman fan. But prior to that, he was blowing up over at Marvel doing Fantastic Four and the X-Men. I mean, you know, those runs are absolutely legendary. And Alpha Flight, even to an extent, right? Like, I loved his Alpha Flight run. It was just so cool. And the thing about John Byrne that I liked is that he was a writer-artist. So he wrote his own stories. Once he got super popular, he was writing his own stories and drawing his own books. And he was pretty prolific. I mean, he was on schedule all the time. And he had this style that boiled it down. He was like a cross between like Neil Adams and Jack Kirby. And then he kind of simplified it so that he could, I guess, produce a lot of these pages. And what he came up with was this cool style that I still like to this day. It was it kind of was able to find a happy medium of simplicity and rendering. So he would have these characters where they would all have a similar look, I guess, because it was fast for him to draw. So they kind of had like this John Byrne face, where they're kind of like these round, squarish faces with very simple features. He always had this certain style that you could definitely tell. And when I was growing up, I could spot it for sure. And I loved his Marvel stuff, but as a DC kid, it blew me away when they announced that he was going to jump on board and reboot Superman. That was like a giant thing. And those books are still some of my favorites to this day. So anyway, the physical books that I did end up taking with me are the really weird ones. So we can go through some of those. Well, the standard one, the one that everybody usually knows him for, is X-Men stuff and Days of Future Past. And he had like a whole run with Chris Claremont. And Chris Claremont was writing this arc in X-Men. And it was basically them detailing the story, this kind of sad dystopian future where muties were all hunted and either executed or just put into slave labor, mostly executed. I remember this cover is an iconic cover, and everybody's like, everybody's dead. Look at Logan, he's all old. Super cool. And Sentinels were hunting him down, and so what they ended up having to do was they needed to go back. Future Kitty had to go in the past, into her young self, and tell basically the X-Men to stop whatever it was that would cause this future to happen. It's very cool. Wow, look at all those words. Back in the day, it wasn't... they really did make you read. Not like nowadays. But anyway, the John Byrne face that I'm talking about is like this one for Colossus. Like, there's a certain style that he pulls off. And I love like how he drew, like how simple his women looked. So there's a certain stylization that maybe also has some manga, but I don't really know. I just love the way he drew these things. He drew, he's very influenced by Kirby. So he's got like these explosions and all that kind of stuff that, even like some of the debris that he likes to do. Some of his favorite characters are like the Kirby characters. So when he moved over to DC, he was doing a bunch of stuff with the New Gods. His Wolverine was super cool. I loved his Colossus. Still, I know that stuck to me as to why I really liked that character when he was drawing. But he drew like these awesome epic fights, and they were a lot of fun. He drew like the Blob, or just this really, like fat people, really awesome. I felt like he drew like this Pink Pearl, I think was her name, in Alpha Flight, and I love that cover. It was just like pink background and just like this really huge lady, and that was her power. She was really huge, and she could like, she's kind of like the Blob basically. But I loved also like how he drew Tech. It was like this kind of like, it wasn't as wild as Kirby, right? But he would just always bust it out, and I remember aping this style, and I remember I would steal like the way that he would render glass, and I think I still do. It's not obviously apparent in my artwork now, but I did like that simplicity that he brought to his art. It makes it sound like it's like super simple. It's clearly not, right? Wait, this is not Byrne. This is Geis. That's a good cover though. He just managed to find that way of detailing things, and his inker was Terry Austin. Back in Marvel, and I think that was some of his better stuff. It was very tight, so maybe good and bad at the same time. And then here I have another one here called Superman Batman Generations. This is later in his career, and his stuff gets even more simple. I'm not sure how I feel about his simpler stuff, but I understand it as an artist for sure. Like, you can move faster with this. Like, he still gets all the stuff going on there. Superman, this crazy monster Superman is awesome. So the premise of Generations is that he goes through the print years of Superman and Batman, and how they would progress as if they really did live through all these years. So he would come up with reasons for why Superman's easier, for why Batman would go from like, all the way from the 40s to like the 90s, and who takes over his cowl and his mantle, his kids. Superman, meanwhile, like, he's Superman, so he can kind of last for a while, all the way to like the far future. 1939. And so he would take stories with that style. So it'd be like this Dick Sprang kind of Batman. And it was kind of like his homage to the history of these characters. You get Mr. Mxyzptlk and Batmite. And I remember when he was on his Man of Steel run, I really loved it. That Mr. Mxyzptlk issue. And I just really love the way these things were just economized so he could keep drawing. I mean, by the time he's older, he's got like certain quirks that he'll always fall back on, and like a looseness to it, as opposed to like his X-Men stuff. And I guess you could say like it's not as good, quote unquote, but at this point he is really just cartooning, so he could get these pages done, get them out, and tell the story. Because like I said, he was a writer artist, so he liked to tell big stories, grander stories, and so he would always find this happy medium between draftsmanship and storytelling. This story was just so strange too. I think it's the way that he wrote them, or the voices that he gave these characters, that throws me off every time I read this book. It's got great ideas. I think the premise is good. Like Darwin Cook did it with New Frontier, right? Take these characters from their print, when they were printed, and take them through like in the lifespan of that print. And this one, the one that I was earlier reading, another strange one, is is the 3D Batman book that he did. I'm not even sure people know this that much, but I saw it at a used bookstore and I was like, this is fantastic. Oops. And I will introduce this to my children sometime soon. So Ray Zone, I think, is the guy doing the 3D for this. And that dude still does 3D, like to this day. This was like, when was this printed? 1990. So, you know, when you know what you're doing, keeps getting hired, and it's awesome. He still does great 3D stuff, to be honest. So these are very simple. Like this Batman, you know, I love everything that John Byrne draws, but not so much as Batman. I think I said that in a previous episode, because he appears so flat. And I know that's the point, but it's not quite working. But this drawing's pretty cool. Pretty cool in 3D too. Okay, so, and then, which brings me to, I think artistically, I still need to buy those books. I definitely want his Fantastic Four run. That is a lot of fun. Like he's a fan of this stuff, right? So he kind of has a lot of callbacks to these things, and they're fun callbacks. Sadly, I'll read like interviews about his time when he was doing Superman, and he said he's probably one of the worst times in his career, and he wished he never did it. But I think whatever it was that he must have gone through with editorial and whatever push and pull that happened, it turned out for the best. I mean, it made a lifelong fan out of me, right? Like, that Superman run is the one that I remember the most. And, of course, after he left, that run, I think, is one of my favorite ones. Death of Superman, all that kind of stuff. Superman getting married, all that kind of stuff. But he kicked it off, and I loved it. And I remember this is one of his stories with Lana Lang. This is, you can totally see here, Terry Austin inking the crap out of him. Look at that. Like, look at all the detail in this. And, like, you know, Terry Austin brings his own thing to these faces, and it still is Byrne doing these, right? Like, he's still doing it. Still his John Byrne face right there. But this was earlier on, so obviously you have something to prove. And Terry Austin just inked him great. Like, all this tech that he draws, I used to draw it like this all the time, like a bunch of lines and make it look high tech, and it was fun. It's metallo, I don't know. Was cool. Luthor was just mean, just rips his kryptonite heart out, which powers him, right? And he made Luthor this corporate raider, which was awesome. But it's also this Superman physique and face that is etched into my brain. The John Byrne Superman. And it just looks so great. Like, I just remember it so much when I was a kid. And his Clark was cool with the super round glasses. And I mean, this was crazy. This is Lana Lang getting messed up. I mean, it wasn't dark, I guess, but it definitely was a very different tone of story compared to the Kurt Swan days that I also read. But this was cool, you know, like, Superman's super mad. Super mad. I didn't even mean to do that. Okay, so now let's pull up some of the stuff that I had for actual Man of Steel, and I'll do it this way. So this is the cover that I had when I was a kid. My cousin from Canada had a whole run, but this is the cover that I like the most. And now that I think about it, I think a lot of my Bomb Squad stuff is patterned after the Man of Steel. So Man of Steel is when he rebooted Superman. And every issue, he would spotlight a character in Superman's life. So this one's obviously Superman. And, Clark Kent and his origin story. But the second issue is devoted for Lois Lane. And he would do this thing where he'd put the character on the side there, and there's like a blank space. I always remember this blank space. And, a little clip or a snippet of the art of some action thing going on. I thought his Lois looked great. Like, the short hair, totally feisty. It was a good template for the Lois and Clark TV show. And then, he had Batman, because Batman's cool, right? But, as a Superman fan, it's like, why is Batman there, man? Like, Batman can be in his own book. Why does he have to be in the Superman book? But, this was one of the cooler stories there, too. It was their first meeting. And he redefined their relationship to each other and all that. And that was big. He was inked differently. He was inked by Dick Giordano. And, I think it is Dick Giordano. Yeah. Dick Giordano. And I remember it was a little light to me, some of the inks, even back then. This one looks good. This is a great panel. Dick Giordano is like this legendary, inker artist at DC. So, who better to trust with this stuff? But it definitely did look different than when Terry Austin is inking it. But you know what? Like, I think this was solid stuff. Like, he could just get it done on time and on schedule. Terry Austin stuff, like, he was there on Superman for a little bit, but he wasn't there for a long time. He had other people filling in. But here's another drawing that he did that I'll always remember. It's like this Superman physique and that Superman John Byrne face. That's always stuck in my head. But this stuff I just really liked. And to this day, I still like it. I haven't read it as much, which is interesting. I don't think I pull from his stuff as much nowadays. I just pull from how he worked, I guess. Like, writer artist is still like this big deal to me. I mean, I guess back in the 90s it was too. But there weren't a lot of people doing that. So Jack Kirby is in that way, right? Like, that's why I like his stuff. Anyway, so I think after Superman, I don't know what happened. Where did he go? After Superman, he may have just gone off to Dark Horse, and then he started doing this Next Men stuff, which is kind of like an X-Men style book. But I mean, it's definitely got its own thing. It's definitely got its own thing going on for it. There are a lot of similarities here. The other one that I remember is he did She-Hulk, which was like this kind of parody or a self-referential thing. Oh, sorry, this is like horrible focus here. And Wonder Woman. So, I'm still on DC, and I remember I really did like his Wonder Woman run as well. And he was getting super loose by then. And he was inking himself, so I think that was going faster. But I think it kind of lost whatever it was that I liked before. And I'll still look at his stuff nowadays and go back to it. And I still like it for different reasons. But I did notice, like, I can understand it better now, I guess, now that I'm older and drawing these things as well. But, in between then, Like when he did leave Superman and go into Next Men, and he was inking himself, I remember I didn't gravitate towards his art. I'm still like not totally blown away by it, but I can't say like, oh, I wish he went back to those tight old drawings again, because how would he be able to pump out the stories that he wants to pump out? Like Next Men, there's like a lot of issues of Next Men alone on his own, right? And just like his, but admittedly, I love his Fantastic Four stuff a lot, and that stuff was like really tightly rendered. But it is that thing. So like with Bomb Squad, that is something that I keep in the back of my head, like speed is part of it, economy of line, and clear storytelling. So at the very least, I think because John Byrne is in that generation where storytelling was king, or I mean, I guess it still is. It's just it was ingrained in what they were drawing and what they were showing, and even when he draws things really loose, he still is able to pull off a clear story. I remember he also drew OMAC. So, he's a big Kirby fan. So, he drew OMAC, and it was like this gritty reboot. This was back I think it was in the 90s, late 90s. I'll try to find a picture of that and post it on this video. But I loved it. But he used this, it's almost like a gray tone where it was just lines, but it wasn't cross-hatching because the lines always just went one direction, as far as I can remember. So if anything, it kind of flanned it out, but in essence, it was almost like Zipatone, kind of. Here we go. Well, here's his Wonder Woman, and you can tell, like, it's a lot brushier, and I'm not sure if his style lended itself to that. I mean, it looks good. And he drew her with this big hair, and I did like the way this looked. It was like when it got printed, I think Patricia Mulvihill, which I think is his wife. I don't know. I'm probably spouting off lies. Colored his stuff for Wonder Woman. It was very colorful, and I liked it. I remember really liking it. It's very, very different. When he came over to DC, he did a Legends run, and he basically like drew every DC character there. But yeah, see, he's like a lot looser now. Or now. This was a while ago. Later on, he got looser later on. Those clouds, those are not like his typical John Byrne clouds. But he will do his tech. He was like adding a lot more ink going on here, and like this. I remember he drew a really awesome Dark Side back then. Here, let's see if I can. Oh yeah, you can kind of see it. Much looser, much looser. And depends on you. Like there are some artists, as they get older, they get a lot looser because they, either the super hyper detail rendering is going to drive anybody nuts, and mess up your hands. But, it is pretty cool. He still has some pretty cool stuff in there. Nowadays, I'm not sure what he's doing, but, he is a giant influence to me growing up. And it's his books that got me into Superman. I mean, I was already a Superman fan, but it's that that generation, that era of Superman that is still stuck in my head as like the Superman that I know. And John Byrne was a legend. I have no idea. I mean, I probably should not try to get myself in the rabbit hole of doing research on what happened or which bridges he burned or what his philosophy in life is. Maybe I should just stay away so I could still think of him in like as pure of a light as I can. I mean, I don't think I'd hold it against him, whatever. I still really appreciate his art and what he brought to the medium. Like, he was the guy, like, back in the day. So to see him come over to DC was a big deal. I think he did like a Batman issue that was no words, that had no words. I think it was the many deaths of the Batman. And that was a big deal because Batman was huge and John Byrne is huge. And of course, John Byrne drawing Batman. I'm not sure if he actually, I mean, he was on Superman for the longest time at DC. And he could have drawn anything, really, but he didn't really pick Batman. That's something to think about now that I think about it. Maybe it wasn't his favorite. And he even had a longer Wonder Woman run than that. And I remember that in his Action Comics run, he basically used that as a gateway. I think it was almost like a Superman team-up book. And it was cool because he just drew every DC character that he wanted to draw, and it was just for an issue, and then he's out. But I remember his Green Lantern was super cool. I really liked the way he looked. I don't think I remember him drawing. He did draw the Flash, and I remember he drew him later on. Hawkman, he drew them pretty cool. Guy Gardner was pretty cool when he drew him. So in Legends, he orchestrated this big DC crossover, and Suicide Squad spun out of that. It was like this apocalypse based scheme, like Darkseid scheme, to take down the heroes of Earth, the usual stuff. But all that stuff, he got to tap into the DC universe, and I ate it up. I totally ate it up. Even though, like, nowadays as an artist, I look back and think, like, his best stuff was actually at Marvel, like, artistically. But I think, like, maybe he was able to flex his creative muscles a little bit better at DC. But, according to him, he hated his Superman run. So what do I know? But in any case, that's my dealings and my experience with John Byrne. And I really should go buy one of those, like, omnibuses of John Byrne, especially his Fantastic Four one. Just to get it here. I should really get a copy of Man of Steel as well. That was such a landmark comic. Like, straight up bagging and boarding these things and reading it as if it was the holy grail of comics. Anyway, that's it for the comic portion of Comix Rant. Hope you enjoyed my ranting. And I will switch over to the drawing portion, which will be, I took a break from drawing my comic, and I kind of semi-cheated because I'm trying not to do fan art. So instead I did fan art of my own characters, or my own character. Sometimes it's good to just kind of take a break from the sequentials and just do like some kind of pinup just to break out of the usual mode. Anyway, so that'll come up in the next half, and I will see you then. Welcome to the second half of Comix Rant, and I will go through my process on this fan art, my own fan art for my own character in this second half. So I'm back again, drawing in Procreate, And this character is actually one of the characters for my epic grand opus of a comic book that's been brewing since college, I guess. And I'm old. I'm like 44 years old, so college is a long time. But this was the book that I was trying to do initially before I drew the Bomb Squad. And it's this like, it started off as like these, 3 guys that, were, like armored dudes. And this is like in the 90s. I'll see if I can dig up a sketch of these guys of what they were supposed to look like, when I first drew them. And they had like these laser spears and like laser hammer, and everything's got Kirby dots on it with like Jim Lee rendering on the arms. And they had like, generic looking like armored helmets. And they were supposed to be, based off of, the biblical book, Judges. So as a kid, my mom noticed that I was getting into all these like crazy violent things, right? Like whatever they were, or at least I'm projecting here. I'm actually not sure what my mom, if she was trying to steer me away from this stuff. So she was like, hey, you want some, whoa, sorry about that. You want some, this isn't what she said, but like, so she's like, hey, you want to read some violent stuff? Why don't you read some Bible stuff that's violent? So like, she kind of steered me towards this book, called Judges. And I just remembered some of the story. In Judges, the most famous one that you would know would be Samson, right? But there's all these other ones in there, smaller scale judges. And, I don't think I actually read them when my mom was like, hey, read these books, instead of the crazy stuff that you're reading. At least try to read the Bible. I don't think I actually did. But I did later on, a few years later on. And what some of the stories that stuck in there, I thought were kind of pretty fascinating. I mean, Samson, of course, is pretty freaking awesome. But some of the lower level, characters, or not lower level. What am I talking about? I'm talking about like it's a video game. These, characters in the Bible that aren't as popular as Samson, were in there, and they had like these crazy, really, they existed in some really violent, turbulent times. But it was cool because they were very human. So they had a lot of flaws, to their character, and yet God still uses them in his way, right? To, try to, well, in those times, to save Israel, basically, right? Like to get rid of these dudes that keep, attacking and invading them. So I was like trying to fit that into like these like image looking characters, in the wrong way. So like at the time I was developing it, I was like, yeah, it's violent. Yeah, they're going to stab fools with laser things. And, so I wasn't quite focusing on some of the cooler aspects about it. Like what I just said, like they're human, right? Like these characters are superhuman. No, sorry, not superhuman, like superhuman, like they're very human. They're very human. And yet with these flaws, they're still, God is still able to use them, and with these crazy fights and battles. So these 3 characters were just primarily made like that. Like this was in college, so I was trying to come up with my own thing, along with these other guys in college too that were into comics. And one of them was Shant and Jetty. You should check out his YouTube. He does amazing stuff. But we had like a jam one night, and I think this was in his apartment, if I remember this correctly, or wherever he was staying. I think it was his dorm room. And, my stuff just, still to this day, it still looks like generic stuff, right? And then it was like super generic. So I forget what the guy's name was, but he was there and he was making his own comic stuff. And as you know, I think we went around and everybody's trying to help each other, come up, with better ideas or make their ideas better. And this one guy, Shant, will hopefully comment on this and tell me what his name was, but came up with this genius idea of transforming these characters. Because I think I mentioned that I did like this, like these like alien conspiracies, and this X-File thing I think was kind of getting big around then, so I was kind of into that. And ghosts and all the spirits, and you know, there's like this biblical thing going on. And he came up basically with the general idea that these characters can be like this more supernatural twist to it, right? Like to push it to that supernatural theme. And I'm not sure if I was getting into like the more realistic, like grounded look, and I'm not sure if that's what like seeped its way into how these characters look, or if it was from that round table idea thrown. I don't even know who came up with what nowadays. I just know what came out of it. So hopefully I don't get sued if I like actually come up with this book and somebody says like, hey, that was my idea. I'm what's his name that you can't remember right now. But what shook out of it was something that was kind of cool and got me a little closer to some of the themes that I was trying to work on. And anyway, so one of the characters is this character that I'm drawing here. And I would always flip-flop on how to draw these characters. So right here in the beginning of this whole comic book thing I'm trying to push, I don't even know how to really draw them or really render them. I had like a bunch of sketches, and they would range from like realistic to cartoony to, you know, and I was never really happy with the way it looked, except for this girl that I'm going to draw now, or show you the drawing of her now. And she is just like this girl with a hoodie on. She wears a jacket, like a leather jacket from her ex-boyfriend. And then she has like a broken baby rattle around her neck that doesn't make a sound. So it's just very like these simple, simply designed characters, right? But there has to be something that's interesting about them. And what I've found is when I draw this character, it's easy for me to make her interesting. Like, even though, you know, it's just a normal girl with a hoodie on. But the other two guys, one is blind and one is mute. And one is like from a street gang, and one is from like this cult. Yeah, so it's kind of crazy. And I've always tried to draw them, and the more I draw them, like superhero-y, like, the more I find it's not really in their character to look like that. So this is all this crazy stuff that's going on in my head as I'm like trying to draw this thing. And this was the book that kind of broke me and just made me go, you know what? I'm going to put this aside because it's too much to think about, to try to plan out. I'm like getting way too serious into this that I am hindering myself from actually drawing anything, or even a comic book. And so that was bad. And that's how Bomb Squad came about. So it's ironic that for me to take a little break from the Bomb Squad pages to draw a pinup of one of the characters from this book. Anyway, okay, so let me play this. So I'm not even sure I knew what I was drawing when I started, but it was a girl. I was just drawing this girl, and I gave her a hood because I think I was thinking of another character from the Gauntlet designs that I did from back in the day. And then as I'm slowly drawing her, I'm like, oh wait, she kind of looks like what this character could be like that old character of mine. And I just kind of drift towards there. See, so you could see like on this side, it looks like a cloak because she was supposed to be like the thief in Gauntlet. And then I start altering it and trying to put this leather jacket on her. And it's interesting for me to watch myself draw these characters through the years because I keep changing. I keep changing styles. And for this one, you know, I'm drawing the Bomb Squad. So my kids will come up and go, oh, is that Bomb Girl's mama? Because, you know, it does look like Bomb Girl. But it was interesting for me to do this because I felt comfortable in drawing her repeatedly like this, in this style, in this look. That's not as slick or as refined as the Bomb Squad characters are, and the brush line that I use doesn't have to be super clean. But still it shares a lot of the simple lines, not overly detailed, but then not overly simple either. And I can still make it look like, so it's supposed to be like a horror comic, right? Horror comic. So it's supposed to be scary. And I think I can still achieve that, even though they don't look that realistic. And so I'm coloring this in, and my color theory is very basic. So of course I'm gravitating towards Christmas complementary colors, red and green. And it's the way that I'm drawing this, I'm also thinking in a Bomb Squad kind of way. Like it's only really just a flat color and then a highlight and a shadow. So maybe that's one extra color than Bomb Squad would have because there's a highlight. But I kind of liked it. Well, this is the end of that. But I kind of liked it because of what I ended up with in this drawing. Now, the true test, I think, is if I actually did character designs for the other two guys, the blind guy and the one that's mute. I think I'd probably get stuck again trying to stylize those guys to fit so that they look like they could stand next to this character. But I really liked how this one turned out. Like, and how fast it was. Like, even the time lapse is only like 2 minutes. And maybe this will be the next book that I can tackle. I think I can, story-wise, I can handle the themes that I'm trying to do with the horror angle and the supernatural aspect of it. Even the scary parts, I think I can do because of my previous work that I did in Inktober. I think I might be able to tackle it now. Well, of course, I still have to finish the Bomb Squad book, but I think I'm getting closer to it. So it's kind of a nice feeling to... this is going to bite me back later on, isn't it? But it's kind of a nice feeling to know that mentally, I think I'm ready to approach it now. Like this book that I was trying to base off the book in the Bible of Judges. I think I'm ready. At the very least, I know that my limits nowadays, so I can approach it better and know like how far I can push without driving myself insane. I think, hopefully, when I try to tackle it. I will probably just do one issue to to test out the waters, like to see if I can do, to hit the tone and to kind of lay out quickly, like how these characters are within, I don't know, 20 pages or 22 pages. I may have to see if I should explore presenting it as a digital comic. But there's definitely something about print that I can't let go of just yet. But anyway, I don't think I actually even talked about how I did this drawing or any techniques. But it was just very fast, and it was nice to kind of take a break from the sequentials. Next episode, I will be back doing sequentials. My kids actually have gotten so into drawing their own comic books. It puts me to shame. Like, so one time they actually just wanted to draw comics, and I was like, all right, then I'm going to have to start inking my Bomb Squad page. So next episode, I'll go through that. Hopefully I'll have a finished page again. And that's it for this episode of Comix Rant. Hope you enjoyed it. I will be back. See you soon.